I want to tell you about how an orange, a little orange wrapped in a piece of plastic, changed my perspective, changed my life forever. I wasn't planning on filming a video today. Well, not this one anyway. I was planning to come out on the Virginia Creeper Trail and have a nice trail run. You kind of disconnect for a while, but something happens when I'm out in nature. And when I do disconnect, things start to flow and start to come back. And I don't know if it's the heart rate or the movement or the trees or just a combination of everything, but this came flooding back to me and I want to share it with you today because I think it's important no matter who you are, whether you're in public education or not, no matter what part of your life you're in, whether you're in the midst of starting over like I am, or if you're exactly where you want to be, the lesson I learned from this orange, the lesson that changed me, I think can help you too. So this came from when I was assistant principal at a middle school. This was my first year in that school. I was fresh out of grad school and I thought I had all the answers because, that's kind of how it goes in academia. You study the books, you write the papers, and all of a sudden you know more than other people who have done it for years. And that's how I approached the job. I knew going into this job that this was a high needs middle school, a high poverty area, lots of childhood trauma, and consequently lots of negative behaviors from students. And so I was tasked by the school board to get in there and to clean things up, so to speak, to come in and be the strong arm of the law and to change things for the better. And so I walked in with all kinds of bravado and I thought that's exactly what I should be doing. And I thought I knew how to because I just read the books and wrote the papers and did the training. I was the man for the job in my mind. I thought I knew exactly what I would go in there and do. And I thought it would work great. And I thought that all these kids needed was a strong hand and a strong set of rules and a big, thick policy manual to set everyone straight. I was wrong, obviously, or we wouldn't be having this conversation today. And schools, it would be a much easier place to be and to work and to exist. So it's obviously that I was extremely wrong about that. But I did not know how wrong I was until the first big issue that I had to deal with. And this was a 6th grade girl. And she had just, for reasons unbeknownst to the adults in the building, had just gone ballistic and had torn into another girl. She just turned into a wild animal. I wrote about this before, but on the camera footage, it just looked like she had just transformed into a wild animal, teeth and claws, and it was a terrible thing to watch. And so obviously, big deal in schools or anywhere. Can't be having that. So she landed in my office, and there she was, this tiny little slip of a girl, and sitting in my chair with her arms crossed, staring daggers through me. And it seemed that no matter what I said to her, and I gave her all of the big principal man spiel of how disappointed I was and how we didn't behave like that here and how dangerous and inappropriate this behavior was, all of which she already knew. But no matter how much I pounded the table or, how forcefully I voiced my disapproval, she didn't budge. I got nothing from her. No explanation and definitely no remorse. And the longer that she withstood my lecture, the longer that she just sat there and didn't say anything back, the angrier and angrier I became. Because I'd had it in my mind that I'm the authority figure here. She's a 11, 12-year-old maybe girl, and she should be afraid of me. She should respect my authority just because some people on the school board gave me this job. So that should be good enough for her to respect me and to listen to me and, by golly, to show a little bit of remorse. But she didn't. And I became more and more upset. And, she just stared at me defiantly, and it got to me. Finally, my better judgment took over, and I decided to take a breath, push my chair away from my desk, and just sit in silence for a moment. And I'll never forget the day. It was just a beautiful October day. There's this ginkgo tree outside the school, and it was just golden, absolutely beautiful. So I took a minute to look outside and just take it in and try to calm down, because I could feel my heart racing and my blood pressure spiking. And, I wanted to yell at this girl and break her, but, something inside me told me that wasn't the best course of action in this situation. So I took a step back from the situation and took a deep breath and just decided to tell her what was going to happen. So I told her, policy says 3 days suspension for fighting, so you'll be out of school for 3 days. And at that moment that something shifted in her. She began to look a little uncomfortable, and I saw an emotion cross her face. A little bit of fear. Her posture loosened, she deflated a little bit. And my first thought was, oh my God, I finally won, finally got something out of her. Haha. I felt victorious in that moment to see this child deflate in front of me. I'm ashamed to admit that now. But like I said, I was a different person then. This was before the change. So I felt very victorious, very big, very important to finally see this girl that had defied me so much, to finally see her break even just a little bit. And at that moment, her eyes shifted and she drifted down to this little orange that was on my desk that I had forgotten that it was even there. It was an orange that I had picked up from the cafeteria, picked it up off of a tray that was going to be thrown away, picked it up and brought it back to my office to have as an afternoon snack. Her eyes drifted down toward that orange, and she said, 5 words that will forever change my life. She said, can I have that orange? Now, that may not seem at first glance, at first listen, that words that are so impactful. At first blush, those words may not seem like big, important, impactful words. But this is what they did to me. They put her into focus for me. I finally saw her for what she really was. And what she really was a girl who was hungry, who was scared, who knew that she was not only going to be suspended from school, but she was going to be suspended from food. So upon hearing that she was going to be suspended, her first thought was, oh my gosh, I'm not going to have any food to eat for the next 5 days, because it was going to be butting up against the weekend. So her first thought was, I'm going to be without food for 5 days. And when I realized that's what she asked, something inside me broke free. And I saw her in a whole new light. It's like fog had been lifted, and I finally saw and finally was able to focus on this little girl in front of me. She was tiny, skinny. At the thickest part, I could put my hand probably around her upper arms. And before that, I didn't see that. Before that, I just saw a bad kid. A kid who had gotten into a fight. A kid who needed to be taught a lesson. Who needed to be suspended from school. And that's all I saw her for. But it wasn't until she showed me a little bit of vulnerability, until she let it slip that she's not afraid of anything I can do to her. But she was afraid of being away from school for 3 days suspension, 2 days weekend, 5 total days without food. And that absolutely devastated me. And at that moment, shame and remorse just flooded me. And tears came to my eyes, and I got up and I ran out of my office. She probably thought I was crazy, but I ran out of the office. And with tears in my eyes, started rummaging through cabinets and drawers and, going around to the other offices, in the front office suite and scrounging together all the food that I could find from my colleagues to send home with this little girl. So I come back to the office with my arms full of food, protein bars and peanut butter crackers and, the things that we took for granted and had stashed away in our drawers and forgotten about because we had so many options at home and at work even. Food that we had forgotten about and would never miss, but would mean everything, would change everything for this girl. So I go back to my office with all of this food and I knock on the door and she lets me in and I tell her to empty out her backpack, dump all the books in the floor and, put this in the backpack instead. And she looked up at me and she didn't say anything, but she looked at me with different eyes than she looked at me before. We didn't talk about it, but she knew in that moment, she knew that I knew. She knew that I finally saw her and finally saw what she really needed in that moment. So for that suspension, she went home with a backpack full of food instead of a backpack full of homework. I knew we could make up the homework when she got back. We could help her with the schoolwork, but what was more important in that moment was making sure that this little baby had food at home. And that really shifted my perspective about not only about her, but students like her in general. The hallways of our schools and our streets are filled with students with so many similar stories I think we get stuck in this. We get stuck in this idea that they're just bad kids. We get stuck in the idea that these are just bad kids who need hard discipline. And that's part of it. There should always be consequences for our actions. But it can't just stop there. It can't just stop there. And it didn't for this girl. She had her consequences, but she got more of what she really needed, which was someone to care about her, to send her forth with something that she actually needed. Because for her and for a lot of kids, the things that we can do to them, to punish them, to make them uncomfortable on purpose within the halls of a school are nothing compared to what they go through on a daily basis and what they see in their normal lives. Violence, hunger, anger, abuse, pain, nothing we can do, no suspension, no detention, no consequence that we can impose within the walls of a school can touch that. And therefore, when we do those things and nothing else, when we just punish, when we just push away, when we just suspend, we are creating yet another place where these kids, where these people, where these future adults, these human beings feel unwanted. And it becomes another place that they don't want to be and that they'll do anything to get out of. And so that's how an orange changed my perspective. And I guess it's more than an orange. It's an orange and a girl. I'll be forever grateful to her. And in fact, I just received a Facebook message from her. And the Facebook message said that she thinks about me a lot. She thinks about the time that we spent together, because this wasn't the last time we were together. A backpack full of food definitely didn't fix what was going on in her life. But from then on, the relationship was different. But she thanked me for all the time that we spent together. She apologized for being so hard to deal with. And as she put it, she was sorry that she bullied me so much. And I think that's funny. And I responded back to her and let her know that she taught me so much more than I could have ever taught her. And I'm forever grateful to her. And within the exchange of messages, she let me know that shortly after she left the middle school, she entered into foster care in another region of our area with a wonderful family, and graduated high school, is going to college, and is just happy and healthy as she could be. And I'm not saying that to toot my own horn, because it wasn't me that did that. It was the concerted effort of a lot of folks and a lot of good people, a lot of better people than me, and an amazing foster family that put this girl on the right track and helped her hopefully break out of that cycle of this poverty and abuse and trauma and addiction that her family had been experiencing, so that maybe her children and her children's children can live better lives outside of that cycle. But had I just suspended this girl and never got to see her for what she truly was, I don't know where I would be, because that truly shifted my perspective from an authoritarian, punishing figure into someone who tried to see the children for who they were, not just what they did, to look behind the behavior and to look further than the behavior and look at the underlying cause. Instead of saying, "What's wrong with you?" to ask, "What happened to you?" Instead of saying just, "Here's your punishment," to "Here are the consequences for those actions, but how can we help you also?" And it really shifted things for me. She's ultimately what inspired me to begin writing the Ugly Me books. Without her, these books wouldn't exist. These books wouldn't have reached the hands of thousands of readers around the world who reach out to me all the time saying, "Thank you so much for writing this." Our students say they've never felt so seen or heard as when they read these stories. And this girl and this orange are the basis for all that. Had I not had this experience with this little girl and with the orange, then none of this would have ever existed. And my career would not have lasted as long as it did. And I certainly wouldn't have this new life as an author and a speaker and a creator who has the broader audience and who can hopefully help bring these stories to people who really need to hear them. So that's the story of how an orange changed my life. And that's something I'll never forget, and I'll always be grateful for this little girl who had the courage to be vulnerable one time so that I could see who she really was and what she was really dealing with. So even if you're not a teacher or an educator or someone who works with students, remember this, because it's not just the schools and not just people in schools that need to be aware of the pain and the trauma of the people around them. I mean, our streets are filled with children and grown-ups whose stories go well beyond what we can see from the surface, well beyond the behaviors of what we can see. So I encourage you to take this story to heart and to learn to see people differently. Learn to see what's really behind what's going on. I'm J.E. Stamper, and this has just been a really vulnerable moment of a story that really changed me, and I hope that you can get some good from it too. I'll see you in the next one.